There was a point in time in my career at UPS, a couple of people called me HB Incorporated. Glenn came to me and he said, Harold, I really feel like you should be involved at Blue Streak. Why don't you come on board with me? And I said, Glenn, come on, man, get out of here. Yeah. I'm going to be the CEO of UPS one day. There were 3 customers in particular that we followed across the country from probably 2012 to 2014. We were in some portion of 26 different states, and it was pretty painful.
What is it like having your kids in the business today?
It's incredibly gratifying and incredibly scary all at the same time because failure is not an option.
Where do you see this industry going?
I'm always excited about the future. I am. I'm more of an optimist, but I feel like everything is getting...
I'm your host, Jason Burns, and we'll be bringing you the stories from the front lines, everything from last mile to the first mile in the most dynamic industry in today's supply chain. If you like the content we're producing, the videos we're releasing, the stories we're telling you, give us a like, subscribe to our channels, give us some feedback on how we can improve your Last2First journey. If there's one thing we know about last mile logistics, it can be the most challenging but critical component of any supply chain. But drop-off, they make it easy. I sold my business to drop-off a few years ago and had a first-hand experience to see why they're the leading provider of same-day delivery solutions in the healthcare, retail, and industrial sectors. National brands trust drop-off to deliver same-day solutions with transparency and timely deliveries to satisfy their needs. Rated as one of the best places to work by the Austin Statesman and a proud recipient of the Inc. 5000 fastest-growing companies in America. Drop-off is transforming the $30 billion same-day delivery industry. Call 888-DROP-OFF or go to dropoff.com and let them serve your needs. Now back to Last2First. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Last2First Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Burns, and today we have another special guest. The guest today is someone who is a past president of the Florida Messenger Association, also currently a board member of the CLDA, and has an incredible story that you're going to hear now. But his story will take you in a wild journey from the corporate side to the private side and really mixing business, entrepreneurship all in one. I'm here with Harold Boyett. He is the president and CEO of Blue Streak. Blue Streak is one of the leading final mile delivery companies in the southeastern part of the country. Harold, pleasure to have you here on the show with us.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate you having me on today. Congratulations on your endeavors with Last2First.
Thank you.
Very excited to share my story with everyone. It's my hope that others may benefit by just hearing my story and some of the things that I've experienced, and that by sharing experiences, everyone can benefit.
Yeah, 100%. You know, when I started thinking about doing this podcast, we talked about off camera. It's really, my goal is to bring visibility to the people, the innovators, the disruptors in this incredible last mile, final mile industry that we've all had the benefit of being in. Your story is phenomenal, and I can't wait to get into it. But let's start with, this is about entrepreneurship, right? So talk to me about your early days. Like what even gave you the idea of wanting to be an entrepreneur? Like, did you even, growing up, did you have any experience where you were entrepreneurial? How did you even get started on this track?
Well, I believe it probably goes back to my childhood. We moved from Brooklyn, New York to Jacksonville, Florida when I was 9 years old. And before I left Brooklyn, I was 7.5, 8 years old. I was hustling. I was trying to find ways to make money. Mm-hmm. And a couple of the ways that I became an entrepreneur was me and a friend of mine, Anthony, we built 2 shoe shine boxes. And we lived about a block away from the Brooklyn Bush bus terminal, now known as the Jackie Gleason bus terminal. Okay. And all of the union drivers had strict guidelines for their uniform, one of which was having shine shoes. So we would take our shoe shine boxes up there, and for 25 cents, we would shine shoes. And 25 cents doesn't sound like a lot of money, but back in the early 1970s, it was a lot of money. Yeah. And I think it wasn't just the 25 cents, it was the tips. A lot of times they would just give us a whole dollar. So we would go shine shoes for a couple hours, and our pockets would be just full of quarters and dollars. And on the way home, we could go by Vinny's Corner Candy Store, and back then, Bazooka was 3 cents a piece.
Bazooka gum,
so
yeah.
we realized quickly if the harder you work, the more you do, the more money you make.
Yeah.
And so some of the other things I would do, we lived in those old Brooklyn row houses that you see on TV. The front porch, we called them stoops. And in the fall, when the leaves would fall, it was 25 cents for me to sweep your stoop. And then when the snow would fall, it would be 25 cents for me to shovel the snow off your steps. And then when that wasn't happening, we'd hit some of the old ladies up to shine their pumps for their shoes. So we found a way to make money one way or another.
So you were, how old were you
I
at
was
this time?
7.5, 8, 9 years old.
Okay, so I have young kids. You've got kids a little older than mine. How does a 7, 8-year-old kid get that entrepreneurial? Like, what's motivating that? What's driving that?
I have no idea. I think I watched my grandfather and some of the things he did. He always had a side hustle doing something to make some extra money. And I continued on. When we moved to Florida, it didn't snow. And the trees were different, so we didn't have as many leaves.
Yeah.
And there was no bus terminal around, so I quickly learned.
Pause. Let's start back when you moved to Florida.
So when we first moved to Florida, there was no snow, and there were not any city buses or bus terminal nearby. So I quickly learned that kids make money cutting grass. So the price was $10 a yard, and I quickly signed up quite a few yards. And I didn't understand that when the rainy season came, the grass was going to grow a lot faster. And
good old Florida grass.
I bit off more than I could chew. So I quickly, I charged $10 a yard, and I quickly asked two of my buddies to help, Mike and Sean, and I offered them $8 a yard to cut a yard for me, and I kept $2 of the money from the customer.
Yeah.
So those are my early entrepreneurial instincts.
So you must have been in the neighborhood there. I mean, you have to be the kid, 10 years old, got some money in your pocket. All the buddies in the neighborhood now go to you to get the job for cutting the grass. Like, how'd that feel?
Well, I didn't understand what was happening at the time. I was probably just more relieved not to let the customers down to not get their grass cut. So I don't know that I was completely connecting all the dots that, cost of goods sold and all that equals net profit.
You had a 20% little markup there going on.
It worked out. It worked out pretty well at the time.
All right. So, okay. So you're 10. You're now in Florida. Siblings, parents, siblings are there. You have other siblings. Were you?
Yeah. Our whole family moved to Florida, and things were going fine. I was probably the next steps for my career. I worked at a grocery store, and at the time, my girlfriend's dad, as I was graduating from high school, he suggested that I get a different job that might be more aligned with going to college.
Okay.
So I followed his advice, and he connected me with a friend of his who worked at UPS. So I went in for the interview. I got the job, and I started out 1985 in the back of a trailer unloading boxes. Within a few days, I was up on the conveyor belt loading the brown delivery vehicles. We called them package cars.
Yep. Breaking out the back of those trucks.
Yep. It was a good time. You're youthful. You have a lot of energy. You can do a lot of that stuff. And I guess the next steps of my entrepreneurial journey, I worked two jobs for about. I overlapped two jobs. My last 6 years at the grocery store overlapped my first 6 years at UPS. All the while I was going to college. I crammed 4 years into 8.
I caught that right.
I was happy to finish. Then I continued on. As I was graduating from college, I got promoted at UPS I went from an operations role into a sales role. They said, hey, we think you would be good in sales, so effective Monday, we're promoting you, and you're going to be a sales guy. Your title would be customer service rep.
Now you're still in college?
I had wrapped up college. I had wrapped up my my 4-year degree, and I I continued on and worked on my MBA. So the next 5 years, I went to college part-time to work on my master's degree.
Okay.
And so the next couple of steps in my career were in the sales function at UPS. So I went from like an entry-level salesperson to like more of a senior salesperson. And it was shortly after that where, if you recall, there was a big strike at UPS where UPS was shut down for like 10 days. I think it was 1997.
Okay.
And we had a work group. At that point, I had been promoted into an acting area manager role. And we had one of my peers was on a special assignment, and as that person was coming back to our district, as we were coming out of the strike, our district was down significantly in sales. And we weren't really sure what the impact was going to be. So I went to my boss and I said, hey, this person's coming back to our sales group. My boss was concerned that we were going to lose that person to operations, and my boss did not want to lose that person to operations.
Mm-hmm.
So she asked me, Harold, what do you think we should do? And I looked at what had happened during the strike, and there were customers that did not use UPS, that used UPS's competition and received horrible service. There were just so many packages that could not get delivered no matter who the company was. So I came up with a game plan. At the time, it was our district was down tens of millions of dollars in sales, and I put a little list together of customers that would equate to about $36 million in sales if I could get all the business. And I said, if you want, you can bring this person and put him in my role. I'll step into a new role. We have not had a major account manager in our district for years. We could reinitiate that role. I'll take that role. And I have a list of customers who are really, really upset with UPS's competitors because they did a poor job during the UPS strike. And they didn't even use UPS. So I put a game plan together, and my boss presented it to her boss. He thought it was a great idea, to which I had the realization that I just put my neck on the chopping block, and now I have to perform. So I had this idea, and I put the list together. The district manager said, whatever Harold needs, we will support him, and we will follow his plan to recover this revenue.
Got it. Let me stop you for a second, because there's some things I want to make sure we get captured here. UPS, I've been around UPS. I've hired people and been around people that have worked for me in my past career that were UPSers, right? Everyone bleeds Big Brown. You hear it all the time, right? In those early days, right, what you hear a lot from the former UPSers are the culture, right? The training, they teach you, how to measure everything you do. So you start off loading trucks, and then you obviously transition into the sales role. But give me a little bit about that experience you had with UPS, the education you got, like the formal training you got in transportation from UPS.
One of the things that UPS does a phenomenal job at is leadership training and management training, helping people understand that you have to have a process, you have to have accountability. It all starts with training the person, teaching what the job is, making sure they understand their job requirements, following up to make sure they're following those requirements. And if they're not, you go back and you retrain them. And at that point, if they still don't get it, it may not be the knowledge anymore. It may just be their desire or lack of a desire to do it properly. And one thing about UPS, it's a union job. When you start out, you have 30 days to gain your seniority. And if you don't make it in the first 30 days, you don't make it. And that's a huge deal. And then everybody knows their seniority date. My seniority date was March 28th, 1985. It's ingrained in my head.
You know it.
So, I mean, that is, you can't help if you've worked at UPS and you made seniority, that is such a big deal that you remember that date.
And what does that mean when you make seniority?
That means that you now are officially through the training, and you're now officially an employee of UPS.
Got it.
Like you're an employee all along, but now you're a member of the union, and you've made your seniority.
Kind of your indoctrination period.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, got it. All right, so let's go back to where you were. So you're now, how many years in at UPS now? You're at with this, when you have this issue with you need to find more sales to your initial motivation to keep this coworker on your team, but you're also ambitious. I know at the time you're also thinking, hey, if I can make a name for myself here, this may help me to get to the next level.
There was part of it. One of the things about the culture of UPS, it's about teamwork. We all want to help the team. And when you get to a certain level, part of your compensation is UPS stock. So the thing that we would say is we're owned by our managers and managed by our owners. So with that, we all are working toward the common good.
Okay.
And so from that perspective, usually if somebody's got an idea and it's got some merit to it, the team rallies around that idea. And I was very fortunate to have the team rally around that idea. And I quickly got to work. Again, it was my idea to do
Yeah.
this. Nobody asked me. I put this list together. I'm like, I was in my head scratching my head trying to figure out how can we get this revenue back. And I was understanding the market and some of the big customers in Northeast Florida at the time that needed help. So I went to them. I presented some options. I came up with a few creative ideas. And I went back to the operations folks at UPS. I said, we need to do a few things here that are special, that are not inside the UPS, they're not on the UPS menu.
Right, yeah. Gotta be a little creative.
We were very creative.
Off the script. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Was UPS always like were they known to give people that kind of flexibility to go explore and be creative inside this, fast moving machine?
Yeah. I think the word that was used was they wanted you to run your operation or run your work area or your work group. They wanted you to run it as if it's your own business, to be as efficient and as profitable as possible. And a nickname that came up was a little bit of an entrepreneurial nature, something entrepreneurial, but internally entrepreneurial.
Right.
There was a point in time in my career at UPS, a couple of people called me HB Incorporated because, like, what do and if I had a nickel for every time someone said, Harold, you're running this like it's your own business. But that's part of what UPS wanted you to do within the guidelines and within the things. But if you could come up with a creative, better way, that was perceived as a good thing.
Got it. All right. So what happened? So you're trying to solve this problem. You got to get so much revenue into save the day, so to speak.
Yep.
Tell us the story. What happened?
There were and these were larger accounts, and typically the sales cycle is typically much longer. The higher the dollar value of the sales cycle is typically much longer. A smaller sale might be a shorter sales cycle, but for the type of business that I was working on, it was from fairly large, longer sales cycle. But I had the full support of the senior leadership at UPS. So I quickly understood some special needs that weren't on the UPS menu. For example, one customer had a lot of overnight packages coming in early. They had a lot of overnight packages coming in which needed to be delivered early.
Okay.
And with the 10:30 delivery commitment, by the time any driver, UPS, FedEx, anybody shows up with a large volume, it takes a while to scan them all and give them to the customer. So when you're getting hundreds, if not over 1,000 packages that are all urgent overnights, it takes a few minutes.
Yeah.
So there was one customer in particular that received a lot that was not happy with anybody bringing stuff to them because it was all getting there later than her boss wanted. She ran the mailroom. It was a mortgage company. The president of the mortgage company was upset with her because by the time the urgent overnight made it through this quagmire of thousands of packages on a heavy day, mortgage companies are busy at the end of the month.
Yeah.
He got an urgent overnight at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He came back from lunch and it was on his desk, and he was very upset with the mailroom manager.
Yeah.
So there were opportunities for this company to direct the carrier that sends the packages to them. So in my creative approach and part of the team that I worked with, one of the gentlemen I got promoted with one promotion was in 93. When he and I were promoted at the same time is when we met, and we were in the same new supervisor orientation class. I knew he was in charge of the Air Industrial Engineering Department that decided what happens in the Louisville Air Hub to send the packages before they came to Jacksonville, Florida. So I went to him and I said, listen, in Jacksonville, Florida, the post office has a lot of zip codes, but there's 2 zip codes they don't use. There's no such thing as 32290, and there's no such thing as 32296. So I'd like to be able to use these 2 zip codes to have a bunch of packages directed into the UPS network, which will allow them to be sorted separately, to allow them to be delivered as early as possible.
And this is for this one client.
So one client. Thousands of extra packages a day, millions of dollars in revenue, which would make a difference, big difference. So let me rewind just a little bit. Just before we implemented that, we were successful in having them route packages through UPS with my attempts to have a driver get them there earlier.
Okay.
But I came up with an idea that might help us get their package to them even earlier than that. And instead of waiting for the first driver to leave the UPS building at 8:45, 9 o'clock and go straight across town and get there at 9:15, 9:30, 9:45 if traffic is heavy, I had this idea for them to be able to have somebody come to the hub at about 7:15 in the morning. About 80% of the packages are there and ready to go at 7:15 in the morning, 7:30 at the latest. And my idea was have somebody come to the UPS hub in the morning and sign for their packages there and just drive them straight back to their building.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, hey, maybe there's a same-day courier that we could use to do that, and I'll just see if the customer's willing to pay that same-day courier. So back then, the UPS used UPS Sonic Air was the name of the company. They bought Sonic Air and rebranded it. And they had a critical parts network throughout the country so that every major market had inventory of critical parts for computers at UPS and computers specifically for their customers to ship packages with them. So the company that handled that in Jacksonville, Florida was Blue Streak Couriers. So I went over and introduced myself to the owner of Blue Streak. His name was Glenn. I said, Glenn, how you doing? I'm Harold with UPS. I've got a customer that has a very unique need. I'm wondering if you can help. And I said, how much would you charge her? The lady that ran the mailroom was Kathy. How much would you charge Kathy to send a driver to the UPS hub and sign for her packages and bring them straight over to her? Like, pick up at 7:15, just go straight there. At that time of day, you'd probably be there before 8 in the morning. He said, Harold, we would charge, I think it would be about $15. I said, okay, great. So I went over and talked to Kathy, and she liked the idea. So I got the two of them together. I said, huddle up, folks. I said, Kathy, I need for you to write me a letter saying it's okay for Glenn's driver to sign for your packages in the morning and that you won't hold us accountable for any claims if he's signing for your packages. And I said, Glenn, I'll need you to have your insurance company write a disclaimer so that if your driver slips on the dock at UPS that, it's on you.
Yeah.
So everybody was happy with the deal, ready, break. I made her a hero to the president of that mortgage company.
Everything now is arriving top of the morning.
Her packages were getting there so early, and she was so happy. So that was just like an idea that I had, that I put the pieces of the puzzle together using my knowledge of the shift that I worked on for the first 8 years at UPS to put all these pieces of the puzzle together, made everybody happy.
Had you had any experience with Blue Streak or any couriers prior to this?
I knew a little bit about what was happening in the same-day industry, but I really didn't pay much attention to it because it really wasn't part of my world.
Yeah.
Fast forward, there were a couple of other unique things that I needed for customers, very entrepreneurial. Another instance where I needed some help that was not on the UPS menu, it was a version of zone skipping. And what I ended up doing was, again, using Blue Streak to help get advanced packages deeper into the UPS network to allow packages to be delivered 1 to 2 days faster. So going one truck full of packages going up the interstate a couple of hours, making it look like they started out up there. Got the customer.
Explain zone skipping, just so we understand.
So a zone skip is where if you're, let's just say you're on the west coast of the United States and you have customers all over the country. If you ship a package from California to Florida, it's a zone 8. It's the highest rate on the rate chart.
Furthest distance.
It's furthest distance,
okay.
Correct. And so what happens is it takes about 5 days. Things have sped up. It may be, it used to be 5 to 6 days. Now it's maybe 4 to 5 days.
Okay.
But a very high volume shipper that has a lot of volume going to another region of the country can load an entire truckload of packages and send them across the country directly into Florida. And instead of paying the zone 8 rate, they pay the zone 2 rate. And sometimes that over-the-road truck can get there maybe a day or so faster. And they have to pay the cost of the over-the-road truck, but the savings on the difference between zone 2 and zone 8 might be worth it to them, even if it's only saves them a little bit of money, but they have better control and the packages are going to be getting there a day faster.
Yeah,
it might be
better
worth
customer experience, et cetera.
Correct.
Right.
But if you're in the Southeast region and you can get a truck of packages 2 or 3 hours north, instead of New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania taking 3 days, it gets there in 2. And that extra day was super important to the customer.
Got it.
So by putting these pieces of the puzzle together, it allowed my customer to have a better solution to get packages delivered in 2 days. And I leaned on Blue Streak to put the truck on the road to be able to do that. So those were just 2 ways back in the day that I first learned of Blue Streak and started leveraging how Blue Streak can invoice a customer directly for a service that would help me meet my goals at UPS for my sales goals. And so the 2 accounts that I won back in 1997 dollars combined were over $10 million in new revenue.
Wow. Okay, so you're at UPS. You in the sales capacity. You have this idea. You use vision, a little ingenuity, kind of go outside the box a little bit, solve the problem, making UPS money. You're feeling good. Your boss should be feeling good. But we know obviously you're not with UPS now. So what happens? We've got a little bit of story. You've met the owner of Blue Streak. Take me through the transition away from UPS and into Blue Streak. What happens there?
So after a few of these creative solutions for customers, helping me meet my goals at UPS, Glenn came to me and he said, Harold, I really feel like you should be involved at Blue Streak. Are you interested in coming to work at Blue Streak? He said to me, Harold, you've got operations experience. You've got sales experience. I like how you approach customers. Why don't you come on board with me? And I said, Glenn, come on, man, get out of here.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the CEO of UPS one day. Which, don't ever do that, folks. Please don't ever do that. Glenn is a good friend of mine to this day.
Okay.
So we didn't talk much about it. And then a couple of years later, I looked at my career at UPS, and a couple of things started becoming more important to me. Pause for a second. When I was a child, one of my best relationships was with my mother's parents, my grandparents. I really, really enjoyed the relationship that I had with them. And we moved away from them when I was 9. And so I kind of missed them a lot as a child. So at this point in my career, I kind of turned Glenn down. But a couple years later, my career at UPS, if you wanted to move up with a company, you had to have the box checked that says, I'm willing to relocate. And the job that I ended up in about this time, I had a year or two where I was literally like the right-hand person of the director of sales, so the entire sales force for a district. So if there was a big meeting, I helped facilitate the meeting. If there was anything new happening at UPS, I went with that person to the corporate office, the region office, to these big meetings. One example was UPS changed their logo back in the mid-'90s, and I was only one of like maybe 150 people in the country that knew the logo was changing. Couldn't say anything, but I had to be the person on site back at the district when the rollout and the announcement came to be part of the launch, because it happened simultaneously across the globe all on the same day. But when I was traveling with these folks, I heard the same story over and over and over again. My district was a small district. There were small, medium, and large districts back then.
Okay.
And the typical career path would be go to a small district on your first promotion, medium district on your next promotion, large district on your next promotion, and then maybe to and from the corporate office at the end or in between one of those. What I noticed was people's families were being strewn all across the country because on their first promotion, UPS would be real good to them and let them stay there until their oldest child graduated from high school. They'd end up in college over in that part of the country, starting a family maybe even in that part of the country. Then another part of the country where their medium district was, now their middle child is able to graduate from high school. UPS is really good and lets them graduate from high school before they give you your next promotion. And then at the end of the process, somebody who went through all that would have their family literally spread all over the country. So holidays were challenging, trying to get everybody together. Each one of their children is starting a life in a different part of the country. So for me, I have 2 sons. I actually have 4 children. I have 2 wonderful stepchildren as well.
Yeah.
But my 2 sons were still fairly young, and all 4 of their grandparents were alive and in Northeast Florida. So I started doing some soul searching and thinking, you know what? If I stay, my kids will have a chance to know their grandparents better.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was unchecking the box that I'm not willing to relocate, went back to Glenn and said, "Hey, Glenn, can we talk again?"
Yeah.
And it quickly turned into a conversation of, do you, instead of maybe you coming to work for me at Blue Streak, Glenn is about 10 years older than me. It turned into a conversation of perhaps maybe you purchase Blue Streak from me.
Mm.
He had never sold a delivery company. I had never bought a delivery company. So we had a very, very collaborative approach.
Okay.
It took a couple of years, about a year and a half altogether. I knew I was leaving UPS about a year and a half before I left UPS.
Wow. Okay.
But you can't tell anybody.
Yeah.
And I never worked harder than that last year and a half because I didn't want anybody to say, "Hey, Harold, you're slacking."
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to say on the way out he had short-timer's disease or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up putting a team together, and it included Glenn and myself. It included an attorney, an accountant, an insurance agent, small business administration. The SBA has free consulting out there for any small business owner.
Help with the financing, I'm assuming.
The SBA was a consultant,
Okay.
and then the banker helped put together an SBA loan.
Got it.
But we did it kind of in conjunction with the two of them. And then I had another consultant, and I leaned into my father-in-law and a preacher.
Mm.
So I wanted to cover all my bases.
Yeah.
I had the A-team.
You had it all
I had the
covered.
A-team. And so this was my counsel.
Yeah. Sure.
This is a major career change. All I ever knew for 20 years was UPS.
And your ambition was to be the CEO of UPS.
Why not?
This is huge. Yeah. You're bleeding Big Brown.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So long story short, I ended up using part of your compensation as a manager at UPS is you get stock at the end of the year. Depending on how profitable the company was, there was a portion of that everybody received. At the time, there were about 30,000 managers and supervisors at UPS, and every December, a portion of stock was shared with everybody based upon profit.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was we were able to structure the deal where we used the stock as collateral for the SBA loan. We did two notes. One was to the previous owner, and one was a larger note to with the bank for the SBA loan.
Okay.
And that was how I became an entrepreneur. I'm actually the third owner of Blue Streak. So Glenn had bought Blue Streak 11 years previously.
Wow. Okay.
So when I bought Blue Streak, it was about 20 years old.
Okay. So at the time, so you finance it. You got the A-team, help me out. You and Glenn worked the deal out. What's the size of Blue Streak? Give me some sense of where it is, revenue, drivers, something like that.
So we had about...
this is 2000...
no, this was 2005.
2005.
February 1st, 2005.
Okay.
So several months ago, I celebrated my 19th anniversary doing this.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
So we had about 30-something drivers. There were 4 people in the office, and we were a little over $1 million in sales. I think maybe 1.2. The run rate, depending upon how busy we were on which day of the week, it was about between 1 and 1.2 million in sales.
Okay. So just I'm gonna move a little bit forward here. So you're coming into a situation, going from a big corporation, right? A lot of people, a lot of resources. One of the first things I think I learned, I had the same experience when I joined my family's business from a big corporation, is you don't have all the resources available to you. And a lot of times there's no blueprint when you go into these small businesses. It's usually the owner, maybe another person or two that's making all the magic happen, but by happenstance at best. What do you walk into, and what do you do?
So for me, the value in Blue Streak as I was purchasing it, fortunately or unfortunately, depending upon how you look at this, there were 2 key people at the company at the time, Patty and Dawn. And Glenn, as we were leading up to this, explaining to a lot of things to me, there were certain things that Dawn did, certain things that Patty did, and his approach was, but you'll be in good shape because Dawn knows how to do all that. But you'll be in good shape because Patty knows how to do all that. So it dawned on me the day after I closed and owned Blue Streak that I'm kind of vulnerable right now because everything I need are in these 2 people's heads.
Oh, yeah.
When you compare that to a large corporation like a UPS, there's a standard process for everything. In fact, the couple of the jobs at UPS, the first job that I had loading the brown delivery vehicles called package cars, It's called the 230 belt to car methods. There's 230 things you need to do to do the job correctly and successfully.
All documented.
Yeah, all documented. You're evaluated on it, and this is how we know what success looks like. If you're a UPS driver, there's the 340 delivery methods. So you have to know the 340 things to do it correctly. Everything from how you put your seatbelt on to how you hold your key. Wow. And it's everything in both worlds of that is now automated, and it's a lot of automation and training and such. But back in the day, that's what you had to know. Yeah. At Blue Streak, I didn't have any of that. So I had to quickly start coming up with some manuals and standard operating procedures. And keep in mind, at the time, Blue Streak was primarily a bank courier. So 90% of our revenue was generated from moving checks, either from a customer to a bank, from a bank to a processing site, either the bank's processing site or another processing site, to and from the processing sites to the Federal Reserve, from the Federal Reserve back to the banks. I mean, checks were going all different directions.
Yeah.
We did over 1,000 bank deposit pickups a day in Jacksonville, Florida, from about 20 community banks when I bought the company. Now, keep in mind, I bought the company February 1st of 2005. In October of 2004, about 5 or 6 months earlier, the final step in the Checking for the 21st Century Act, known as the Check 21 Act. Anybody that's been in the delivery business more than 20 years knows what that means.
It's a landmark in time.
It's a landmark in time, and that's when all checks could then be scanned. And nowadays, people don't even use checks. They transfer money through Venmo, Cash App, all these things, you know, automatic bill pay, you name it. So I knew going into it that I needed to diversify. So I knew what I was buying was going to evaporate over the next couple of years.
Buying a dinosaur.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there were certain things about Blue Streak that were very appealing, besides for what was in Dawn and Patty's head. Professional uniform drivers, the loyalty factor. Blue is the color of loyalty. And there's a triangle that has 6 arrows in it. Our customers are loyal to our drivers are loyal to our customers are loyal to us, we're loyal to our customers, we're loyal to our drivers are loyal to us. It's like it feeds itself. Yeah. It's one of our core values. When you look at what I was buying, my goal was to expand outside of banking and outside of Northeast Florida geographically. So if you look at what we were carrying and what couriers like us carried back then, they were things that could be transmitted electronically, paper and money. You could scan, and now documents can go electronically. But and as a side note, we had some friendly competitors back then. We were all competitors, but if you needed lab pickups, it was this other delivery company. So if we got a call for a lab customer, we'd send them to them. If they got a call from a bank customer, they'd send them to us, which would be unheard of in our industry nowadays. Yeah. But if you look at what I was attempting to do was to expand outside of banking. So people knew what banking, internally, the drivers and the office staff knew everything about banking. But as soon as we tried to do a lab pickup, it was like speaking a foreign language. So one of the things that we had to do is start documenting things and putting things on paper. But before I could even get to that, one of the first standard operating processes I put in place had to do with business development, because I wanted to grow and scale.
You had to.
I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
It was a foot race to diversify geographically and in industry markets that we served. So I'm maybe day 2 at Blue Streak, owning Blue Streak. I'm listening to, the third person in the office was Jamie. I'm listening to Jamie take a call. And here's how the call went. Thank you for calling Blue Streak. This is Jamie. How can I help you? Oh, we can do that. Oh, no problem. Oh, that would be $8. Okay, just let us know. Give us a call. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye-bye. Super friendly. Nice, Jamie, I like your approach. You sounded polite. I said, but by the way, who was that? Oh, it was a potential customer. Oh, really? What customer is that? Oh, I didn't ask their name. What were they looking for us to do? Oh, a scheduled run daily. So we charge $8 for that? Yep. That's it. For what they were looking for, that's roughly an $8 job. Okay. Well, how do we know if they're going to follow through and use us? How how can we follow up with them? You didn't get, you don't have their number. We don't know their name. No, I didn't ask any of that. So I didn't get upset with her.
How often they need this service. Yeah.
I mean, that could have been $1 million customer. We don't know.
Yeah.
So one of the first standard processes I put in place were what I call the green sheet. So it's a form, and I intentionally printed on green paper because green is the color of money, and we want to be able to bring in more money. So this happens, and it was a simple form that started out saying something to this. If this is all electronic, and we use technology now for this, but back in the day, it started off by saying, before giving any information to a customer, please get their name, their company name, and their phone number. We taught people to say, I'd love to help you. Could I first get your name and your company? Yeah. Great. And your phone number? Start capturing that information. What are they looking for? Where are they located? Sometimes it was things beyond our scope or outside of our geography, but we captured that anyway.
Yeah.
For example, Southeast Georgia. We had calls all the time for Southeast Georgia.
Why was that important to capture that? Even if you knew you couldn't necessarily provide the service?
Great question. There were so many calls that came in for an area of Georgia just north of where we operated. So when it was time to expand into that, a few miles to the north, we went back to our list of green sheets and called every one of those customers, said, hey, we're in your area now. And it allowed us to go back and get that. It also had some steps in there for follow-up. So in a small business, you hear the term butcher, baker, the candlestick maker. You wear many hats. Yeah. So one of the questions or one of the things that we captured is would you like to, or is there a need for an account executive to follow up? Well, at the time, I was also the account executive.
You were the janitor, everybody.
You name it.
Yeah.
So it was a way for us to make sure we followed up, and anything that came through, we left no stone unturned if there was an opportunity for more business.
Yeah.
What it also did is it expanded us outside of banking, because some of those calls were things that weren't necessarily banking related. And back in the day, companies spent money on Yellow Pages ads. So if you wanted a larger Yellow Pages ad, it cost you more money. If you wanted to be in more of the local, instead of the big one for Jacksonville, they had local ones for different parts of town. And if you want to expand in other cities, one of the first things you would do is
take out a Yellow Page ad.
Take out a Yellow Page ad. Yeah. So that's something that's foreign now.
Yeah.
Now it's all about a Google search, searching online. So that was one of the first standard processes we put in place. And the next couple of steps were things like if there was a complaint, a problem, how can we capture that? We used purple. We use purple because it's the color of a bruise. I made an observation that we seem to get a lot of calls about billing discrepancies. So we use orange for that. We had a pink sheet if a customer was canceling service. We did a lot of scheduled runs. Okay. And, we used that. And I forget, we used blue sheets for something else. We had a color for everything. Yeah. So if somebody had a certain kind of phone call, they would grab that color sheet and start filling it out. And it allowed us to standardize some processes and improve some processes. For example, a new scheduled run was a specific color. And on there, it wasn't just the information. What I noticed is Dawn and Patty, they did a good job of recycling paper, so they would turn the page over instead of put it in the trash, cut it in four, and use it as notepads. So when a banker would call about a new pickup, they would get all the information to put the pickup in our system to make it a scheduled run. Yeah. But it was all in their head, like days of the week, time of day, who do we see, what's their phone number, time of pickup, all the particulars. Yeah. So we automated that with a sheet of paper that had requested all that, but we augmented it and we added a few steps at the end. A step where it prompts us on every single one to call the customer ahead of time that we're picking up from. We understand we're supposed to be picking up from you on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10. Oh, no, you're not picking up from me. You're picking up from my bookkeeper who sits in the front. Her name is Susie. Make sure you see Susie, not me. I'm just the person the bank was dealing with. It allowed us to vet out all of those granular details. And in that, you have your supplies. Oh, no, the bank hasn't sent them yet. Well, here's what we like to do. We like to take your driver's going to be John. We'd like to send John by the bank to get your supplies and bring them to you. We'd like to introduce you. We'll know John. He'll have a picture ID badge and uniform. We'll make sure he knows what door to walk through and who to see. And then all those steps of mistakes that can occur out of the gate are all eliminated because we've now standardized the process to make sure that we start off on the right foot with the customer, make a great first impression. Somebody taught me a long time ago, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. Yeah, yeah.
And it's so important because in this business, the details are everything, right? I mean, people think that it's so easy to get something from A to B, but there's so many little steps involved, and oftentimes if they're left to an individual or be manually done, something gets missed. I remember early days when I was owning my family's business, had the same conversation with my dad. I was like, there's no processes, there's no systems. I referenced a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, which talks about how the French fries made in McDonald's in New Orleans are the same way they're made in Shanghai, China. It's because it's a process. So you want to have a process-driven business. So you're in there, you're executing, you've got SOPs, the team is seeming to get some momentum, buying into your vision, and you got to grow and expand. How far do you grow? What's the peak? I mean, you're talking about you went to Georgia. Did you go anywhere else?
So before I answer that question,
Okay.
The E-Myth Revisited was one of the books that I read as I was making my decision to become an entrepreneur. Seriously, that was one of the books that, as I was trying to make the decision, that I read through. The 3 ways you can spend your time: visionary, a manager, or a technician.
Yep.
It's a great book, everybody. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it.
E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Check it out.
So my goal when I bought Blue Streak was to expand. And so the first place that I went in August of 2005 was Orlando. My long-term vision was to be a statewide provider. The observation that I made at the time was if somebody needed nationwide service, they needed like hundreds, maybe 300 plus different delivery companies all across the country to cover the country. So my thought was, if I covered all of Florida, then a customer who needs help in Florida doesn't have to find 13, 14 different companies. They can come to me, and the joke is they've got one throat to choke.
Yeah,
There's a problem, they're going to come to one place.
Yeah.
And so that was my vision. So we expanded to Orlando, and we went to all the same banks that we did business with in Jacksonville. If there were any sister companies or similar banks, community banks that only serviced Orlando, we introduced ourselves, told them what we did, and we quickly signed up some customers. Then we started expanding outside of banking with some distribution work and some other things, and we quickly uncovered distribution for office supplies. Okay. One of the banks that we serviced had an operations center that we went in and out of a couple of times a day. So the sales rep for the office supply company was sitting in the reception area of the bank's operations center, and while he's waiting for his appointment to sell them office supplies, they were an account of his. They were buying some office supplies from him. He watches the Blue Streak driver come in, polite, friendly, professional. Hey, Susie, how you doing today? Great. How's your son? Is he doing better? Great. Okay. Hey, I noticed Jane's out. Is she still on vacation this week? Okay, great. And he's having this conversation very quickly, very polite, very professional, getting his job done. Full uniform, picture ID, looking good, smelling good, sharp guy. Walks out, does his thing. And then a few minutes later, here comes a grumpy old man, not in uniform, comes in with a hand truck, making a lot of noise, drops 3 cases of paper in front of the receptionist's desk, grunts at her, hands a sheet of paper, can you sign here, and walks out. So then this guy asks the receptionist, Susie, who was that first guy? Oh, that was Bill from Blue Streak. They do our bank work. A few minutes later, he has his appointment. He leaves the appointment. He goes out to his car, and he looks up Blue Streak and calls us. And at the time, we couldn't help him because the price point he was looking for was just, I couldn't compete with what they were charging. A few months later, they called me back. I got to know them. They were based in Orlando. We quickly started doing their deliveries in Jacksonville and Orlando. We had some other customers that we signed up during that time, and we had a customer ask us if we can help them in Miami. We said, no, we can't. We don't have any business yet in Miami, but maybe one day we might. Okay. And a few weeks later, another customer said, hey, are you guys in Miami? Like, no, we're not in Miami. Then literally like one day later, a customer said, hey, we need some help in Miami. Are you guys in Miami? I said, as a matter of fact, we're opening up in Miami in about 2 weeks. And we expanded into South Florida. We opened up a facility in Dania Beach, a small little office, and started doing the same thing down there. We went to all of our customers that we were doing business with in other parts of Florida, and we told them what we were doing there, and they all signed up with us. And that was our method for expanding. The same story happened with Atlanta. And probably in by 2007, 2008, 2009, we were doing a lot of work in the medical space. We were doing lab pickups were probably 40% of our revenue.
Okay.
But then there were a few governmental changes that affected Medicare and Medicaid with a lot of reimbursement reductions, which changed that industry significantly. At the same time, there were some private equity firms buying up companies that focused on lab pickups, and they were buying a lot of market share, and the prices were being compressed significantly. So we pivoted. And all along we're adding more customers to our small package network.
Yeah.
And then there were 3 customers in particular that we followed across the country. So from probably 2012 to 2014, we were in some portion of 26 different states.
Wow.
And it was pretty painful.
So you go from Jacksonville, Florida to 26 states.
Yes.
How are you managing that?
We did okay. I'm proud of what we did during that period of time. But the challenge is to stay profitable in that many places and to be able to manage from afar it can be very difficult.
So for the listeners out there who are in expansion mode, like, go a little deeper on that for me, because I think a lot of people look at growth and that customer calls and you say yes, and you start saying yes and yes, and you look up and you're like, oh, I've got a much bigger company now. But it's like Biggie Small says, more money, more problems, right? So you find yourself with a 26 state operation, and there's pressures, there's demands, there's commitments, there's all that stuff that's happening. But walk through that experience.
So you remember how earlier in the conversation we first started, I told you how I signed up too many yards to cut grass?
Yeah, I do.
It's a similar concept happened between 2012 and 2014. So what ended up happening was,
and you're multi-million dollars at this point. I mean, the organization is much bigger than what you were. You've
correct. At that point, we were
4 or 5 exited. I'm sure
we were scaling pretty big, and it wasn't necessarily that any single market was a lot of revenue. The collective amount between all of them, and my approach was I was casting a very wide net. If you look back in time, it might have made sense if you look at it through certain lenses. If a customer wants one company and they like what they do and they can do work everywhere across the country, the software platform that we use has some flexibility where you can interact with other similar delivery companies throughout the country. So we leverage that. Quick plug for Key Software. It's their Interconnect program.
Got it.
And so we found a few like-minded companies to help support us. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't practical for us. There was so much more opportunity in the southeastern part of the country. I didn't need to expand all over the country to do that.
Yeah.
So we very delicately backed our way out of some of these markets. And, between 2014 and a couple of years ago, we finally exited from one of the last places that we were operating. We were operating in Las Vegas, Nevada, had a large lease on a large building.
Yeah.
I'm very pleased to say that my manager in Las Vegas became an entrepreneur because I was able to basically transfer the business to him for the Las Vegas market.
Awesome.
So it was a great opportunity for him.
Yeah.
All of his hard work paid off.
Yeah.
And he's doing I'm pleased to say he's doing very well out there now.
That I'm going to interject here because when I owned my business, we came visit you, and you talk about using agents and that kind of network effect. I learned the flower distribution business directly from you in your warehouse, me and my former partner, Warmith, who was a former UPSer. And, every time I called you, whether it be pricing or whether how to keep the cooler on or how to shut it down or repair it, you were always there. And it's a testament to your commitment to giving back and paying it forward. So thank you for that, because that definitely helped me when I went to exit and sell our business. That flower business was pretty good. I want to go to something because so you grew 26 states, a lot of lessons learned. I'm assuming a lot of failures per se. People perceive failure as a bad thing, but I always view failure as a good thing. But every entrepreneur knows that there are there's things that happen along the journey that they're landmarks. Like they you can go back to them. They either motivate you to go forward. So you've had to contract now back to where it's kind of right size the business where it fits for you. Along that way, that journey, talking about some of the personal side of this journey, right? I know you've had a number you've gone through a divorce. You know, you've had some health issues. How do those things, as the leader, you got to keep a face on for the organization? How do you manage that? How do you withstand the personal side that's clearly can affect the professional?
That's a great question. And I don't know that I have all the silver bullet answers. I'll do my best to kind of share how I traversed some challenges.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate because I've always had a great team. Very thankful. And the folks that worked the tier directly underneath me have always worked very hard and always been very dedicated, been very capable, and I've always done a great job. And so as I've gone through some tough times in life where you kind of need to unplug and take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
By the way, we should always take care of ourselves first. That whole thing in the airplane, put the oxygen mask on you first.
Do it first, yeah.
Because if you're not taking care of yourself, you're no good to anybody else. So for me, leaning on a really good team to and I'll say this, for everyone out there, the most challenging thing that you'll always deal with in leadership and management, there's a difference between the two, is being able to delegate. And you have to be able to trust people. You have to be able to allow them to fail forward. It's a bad decision is better than no decision. I'll never forget, I had one boss. And by the way, some of these bosses that I keep referring to, different people, many of them have worked at Blue Streak and worked for me. But I had one boss that my very first promotion into the sales role that I mentioned back in '93, I used to get very frustrated with her because I'd come to her with an issue and she wouldn't solve the problem for me. She would make me go look and figure it out and come back with some solutions, some potential solutions to the problem that I was presenting. Yeah. I quickly learned, don't come to me with the problem. Come to me with what you're up against and some ideas that you have on how you're going to solve it. And if we all do that, we'll be better leaders. And it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
If you leave it up to your mind, you know what is the best option. So let's just move forward with that and not waste any time. But that's not always the best approach. It's good to get input from people who work for you. Let them help you solve the problems. But kind of getting back to some of the personal challenges, when you're dealing with those stressors in life, you've got to make sure you're staying healthy. You got to make sure you're getting plenty of cardio. If you guys are familiar with the flight or fight syndrome, you have those chemicals that start kicking in, the adrenaline starts flowing, and the only way you can burn off that adrenaline, it'll keep you up at night. People say, I can't sleep. You can't sleep because you're stressed out. You got fight or flight. You got adrenaline flowing through you. You got to get rid of it. The way our bodies are designed, you got to get your heart pumping. You got to get some cardio in. One of the best pieces of advice that I received when I went through the first major stress, was you got to take care of yourself and you got to get some cardio in every single day. And by doing that, you'll sleep better. And that'll help your body adjust physiologically to what your central nervous system is dealing with.
All right.
So anyway, between taking care of yourself, diet and exercise, getting the emotional support you need, leaning into your faith, and then having a good team underneath you. We had a situation where one of the members on our team and myself were both going through cancer treatments at the same time. So that meant we had to lean into members of the rest of the team even harder. So people stepped up. People were able to say, you know what? I can do more. I can help. I'll do that. I'll take care of that for you, Harold. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And when you have people that will help you like that, it's amazing. It's amazing. So I'm very thankful for the people that have supported me directly. My senior leadership team is very strong.
Yeah, it goes without saying, but oftentimes we don't talk about team and the support and the continuity, especially in those critical moments when the leader may need the team more than the team needs the leader. And I want to talk just quickly about you have your sons who are involved in the business now. You have two boys, and you have two other stepchildren. What is that like? I've been a part of family business working with my mother and father. Interesting dynamics at play. But what does it mean for you? Now, because I think about it, your journey going from UPS, entrepreneur, the challenges, the growth, you're doing all that for something, right? There's a motivation behind all this stuff that you're going through. I got to imagine part of that, maybe a big part of it is your children. What is it like having your kids in the business today?
It's incredibly gratifying and incredibly scary all at the same time because failure is not an option.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
My younger son is 21. He's still going to college. So the type of work that he's doing are more clerical, administrative, and helping out in the warehouse in our Atlanta facility. And then my older son is actually part of my senior leadership team. He's actually my CTO. Okay. And so everything we do, he also has some CFO responsibilities. We work with a fractional CFO, and so he's the point of contact from a CFO perspective. But one of the most gratifying things is seeing that next generation, and they're new and innovative ideas. Mm-hmm. I think if we all really want to pay attention, we have to understand the nuances between the different generations: baby boomers, Gen X, millennial, Gen Y, Gen Z. Understanding there's differences in how people operate, but the fresh ideas that come from the next generation and the diversity that you want on your team also, you have to have that. And when you leverage that and you step back and let people help solve problems in a way they see, using the latest technology, for example, it's been huge.
Talk about that. We'll probably kind of close out on this too. Part of the reason I named this Last to First is because, in my opinion, my humble opinion, I believe the last mile is now becoming first in today's supply chain. And you talked about innovative and the next generation, and we've seen so many iterations of what last mile, final mile has been before us, kind of in our day and age, and where it's going. You've got all kind of stuff out there: drones, robots, AI. You've got autonomous vehicles. You've had so many experiences in transportation. Where do you see this industry going? How do you see that impacting Blue Streak? And does that future excite you?
I'm always excited about the future. I am. I'm more of an optimist. I always see the glass half full, more to my detriment sometimes. But I feel like everything is getting closer to the customer. Years ago, there might be one distribution center that serviced the whole country via UPS only that came 3, 4, 5 days to get here. Yeah. Nowadays, people are putting inventory, in your zip code, and you push a button, it's there in an hour. Yeah. It's not just Amazon, but everyone now, from food to you name it. So for us, I see that continuing. Mm-hmm. I see residential deliveries being a challenge for everyone. This whole e-commerce boom, you can't keep adding carrier after carrier after carrier after carrier, and the number of packages is not growing at the same rate. Yeah. No one's going to make any money. Yeah. So for us, we're not hyper-focused on e-commerce, residential, final mile. We're focused on staying diversified. So all the while building a very strong regional small package delivery network that can service both business to business and business to consumer type deliveries. Excellent.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us on the Last to First. Again, incredible journey, not over by any stretch of the imagination. And really thank you for, again, always paying it forward, for your leadership, for your tenacity, your perseverance. And I think when people hear these stories, particularly your story, it's going to give them some inspiration. It may be a middle manager that's working at a UPS or FedEx now. I know we often get phone calls from people trying to help people out, and I hope that they can take a little bit from your story and see how they can go from last to first and kind of continue to push this industry forward. So thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's an honor.